finding David after 34 years, it wasn't for lack of trying. The U.S. Marshals High-Risk Fugitive Task Force had been looking for this guy for 34 years. They have traced across the U.S. So did Chambers County Sheriff.
Welcome back to After Action. I'm your host, Damaris Garcia. With us today is retired Diplomatic Security Service Special Agent John Ardepple, who is here to talk about the case against David Anthony Pike, a criminal who was on the run for decades before Diplomatic Security tracked him down. So John, welcome.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here.
Okay, so before we talk about the investigation, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career in diplomatic security? Where did you serve? How did you start?
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I was in the Army for 10 and a half years, and in July 2009, I applied for and was accepted into Diplomatic Security Service, went through the training, and I served until 2022. My duty stations went from Boston, when I started in 2009, into mobile security deployments, a little office that we have that does security across the world for our diplomats. And then I went to Honduras and finished up here at our headquarters.
Oh, very nice. What about setting the stage for us? We are talking about this case, but how did you even get involved in this case? Can you tell us a little bit more background about what happened?
Sure. I should say the second to last duty station I had was Puerto Rico at the resident office that they have there. I absolutely loved it, had a great time. And just shortly before the 31st of December in 2018, I had gotten my feet, into the office, starting to do investigations, had met some of the other agencies, and I get this phone call, and that really kicked it off. It was shortly before New Year's Eve. It was really exciting to be at the office, and I was really looking forward to something that would pop up that might be memorable, and this was it.
So you heard about the case as pretty much as soon as you reported to Puerto Rico?
Yeah, it was within a month or so. We had to find some housing, and then it was literally within the first 30 days that I was at the office. And the 30th day was pretty much December 31st. So.
Well, Puerto Rico is near and dear to my heart.
Oh.
So let's just start off with that. So tell me, who is this guy? Who is this criminal that you get the call about?
Yeah, well, his name was Stephen Williamson Varner, and that was the assumed name. And I'll walk you through it as we go. But he was somebody who was on the lam for 34 years, and it was an assumed name. He was charged with capital murder in 1986 for killing somebody that he knew, and absconded and took this name. And we had no idea who he was. We had no idea who he was until I got the phone call.
So stealing the identity, whose identity did he steal?
Stephen Williamson Varner. We had no idea. He was a John Doe to us. We had no idea who he was. His real name is David Anthony Pike.
Okay.
But we couldn't discover that until we conducted a fast and furious investigation it was a whirlwind. And I feel that it's one of the most interesting investigations that probably has happened in Puerto Rico to date.
So question that comes to mind is how did he hide all those years? What was it, just the fact that he had a fake name?
Yes, it was the fact that he had a fake name. He left Chambers County, Alabama, where he committed the crime and was out on bail, believe it or not, for capital murder in 1986. He then, and this is all after the fact, of course, so we saw the notes from the U.S. Marshals, Chambers County, the FBI. He absconded to Seattle, Washington, and then eventually made his way down to the Dominican Republic, hid there for several years, got married. His whole family, they didn't know what he did or who he truly was. They believed that he was Stephen Williamson Varner and not David Anthony Pike. Then he came to Puerto Rico, and for well over about a decade and a half, he hid out in Puerto Rico in a very dangerous neighborhood and was protected in that neighborhood.
I see. Okay, so you get the call. What happens?
Well, so we get this call, and it just literally is, hey, look, this guy looks like he could be a fugitive. The name he has, Stephen Williamson Varner, we believe belonged to a child that died in the 1950s and hadn't yet been registered with Social Security. And so there's his name, and we checked with Chambers County, where we found this gravesite with this name on it, doing routine checks, just routine fraud prevention checks. And the fraud prevention manager, and I think I'm confident in saying that his name is James, and he called us and he said, well, I'd like to refer this to you guys for investigation. We believe that he may be, on the lam. He could be a fugitive. And so there are some other checks that we did to start. Then after that, we had to find him. And because the address that was listed was not the same address.
Right.
So.
Right. And so you got the call from whom? So who are you working with on this case in States?
Mm-hmm. Fraud prevention manager, James, up in New Hampshire, gave us a call because passport applications, when you submit them, are farmed out to some of our different national passport centers.
Okay. So this was consular affairs working hand in hand with DS.
Yeah, it was a great collaboration.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I got to say, out
That's
of the fraud prevention managers I've seen in DS, this guy was on his game.
So does this happen often? Tell us a little bit more about the relationship between Diplomatic Security Service and consular affairs. How often does this happen, and what's the collaboration like?
So normally when we get a case, we either have something referred by one of our fellow agencies, HSI, one of our partner agencies that we have.
Okay.
The majority, however, come from fraud prevention managers that say, look, this passport or this visa application, it looks a little iffy. Would you take a look at it? And then we will either rule the person out and say what appears to be the real or true ID, or there's fraud. And the fraud ones usually are the ones that pop up because these fraud prevention managers are investigators themselves for consular, and they do very well at what their job is. And so we had a great partnership. I really enjoyed working with him, and he was very astute. So he passed the case to us and said, I have opened an initial inquiry. Would you please take a look at what we have? And that's how it started.
John, tell us a little bit more about that process with consular affairs.
Sure. So normally what happens is we'll get a notification sent electronically to the leader of the agency at where we are. So it would be the leader of San Juan, Puerto Rico, for example, the agent in charge. And he would pass it down to a case agent saying, would you please take a look at this? The fraud prevention manager believes that this could be passport fraud. We then run some name checks to see if it is the true identity. We check their driver's license. We check some other identity documents. We then take a look at their passport history, how long they've had the passport for, if there's any facial changes, to the person, if this is somebody else assuming the identity. And all of this is done to protect our system of passports, of course, and establish their identity, because a passport is a very solid piece of identity. After we do that, if it's a true ID, we essentially close it out. If it is not, and we believe that it warrants further investigation, we open up a case file on it and we begin interviewing witnesses. We go to locations, we take statements, we do facial recognition with some of our partner agencies. And then if we believe that indeed we do have passport fraud, we will go and seek out a warrant. And if it's accepted by the prosecutor, and then we'll go get them. And we will arrest him for passport fraud.
John, after you identified him, how did you actually find him? Walk us through that adventure.
Sure. So we took a look at all the documents that he submitted to renew his passport. He had a U.S. passport and had one for several years under the assumed name of Stephen Williamson Varner. And we noticed that there were some indicators on there as to the neighborhood or the general area where he lived. We had an overflight done by a sister agency that was able to take some high-resolution photos. From those photos, we saw a blue tarp on top of the house. And we knew that due to Hurricane Maria, if you had a blue tarp on top of your house, you very likely had registered for FEMA aid.
Yes.
We ran that address of where that blue tarp was through the FEMA database, and we found that, lo and behold, Stephen Williamson Varner had applied for FEMA aid. And so we believed that that was his address. And that's how we located him. But that's not the end of the story.
Oh, okay.
We had to go and do surveillance and find him.
How do you leverage? This is not your neighborhood, right? Obviously, you have to leverage some kind of, local agency or police, right? Walk us through that.
Sure.
It's fascinating.
We could do that, but we had to do this very quietly. This was a bad neighborhood. It was Barrio Obrero in San Juan, Puerto Rico, in Santurce. And it was a bad neighborhood and is largely controlled by, I think I'm confident in saying, Dominican kind of narco area there where there's a lot of drug lookouts. So we got in a minivan. I had a very long telephoto lens. I sat in the back seat for hours. And we saw at one point someone that looked like him. And there was a lot of unrest, a lot of people that were suspicious of what the minivan was doing there. We're about a block and a half away. So I was taking pictures as I saw what looked or appeared to be Stephen Williamson Varner walk out of his house. And he went and dumped 2 cell phones in the canal behind the house. He believed that he was under surveillance because someone had tipped him off. We got out of there. As soon as I took those photos, we got out of there. We knew we were made.
Wow.
And within 24 hours, we went and swore out a warrant. We had it sealed in case, loose lip sink ships in Puerto Rico. We wanted to make sure that we were good. And then we went into arrest planning. And that's how we discovered him and how we got to the next piece.
I have to ask, was his house the only house with a blue tarp? I mean, that seems like it was...
In that area, yes. In that one block, it was the only house with the blue tarp. And it was just luck that we were able to verify that.
Absolutely. Pure luck. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So how did you actually find his real name?
Sure. The fraud prevention manager, do you remember me telling you that on December 31st? Right, James. James had looked and seen, obviously, that there's another identity of this child who had passed away in the 50s. So he was very curious, and he said, I wonder if this guy's a fugitive, just on a hunch. So he looked through the Chambers County Sheriff's fugitive files to see what pictures they had. And the oldest one they have was a guy named David Anthony Pike. And he was a dead ringer for him, except he had long gray hair, and this guy had short brown hair and a mustache. Same mustache, longer hair, exact same face, really, just aged. And that's how we knew. We had the hunch that it was David Anthony Pike. But we had to find out. You can't find out until you actually run their fingerprints. There's just no other way to do it.
So you leveraged basically the technology of fingerprints. You mentioned facial recognition.
That's correct.
How else did you use this technology? Tell us a little bit more. You take fingerprints when you get a passport?
Well, we took fingerprints after we went and got him the next day.
Gotcha.
So, and that arrest was a heck of a story. I can briefly go over it if you'd like me to.
Please, go into the actual arrest of this guy. Were you there?
I was absolutely there. I was a case agent, or the senior case agent, I should say.
Okay.
So we had upwards, it was between 30 to 40 federal agents, task force that were assigned to the San Juan office. We had 2 task force, Puerto Rican Police Department task force members. And quite frankly, they are the only 2 Puerto Rican task force members or task force members that we have assigned to a DS office and cleared by a DS office in diplomatic security. And it was wonderful to have them. And so I partnered with them, the 30 to 40 other agents. We made a plan to infiltrate the neighborhood and lock off the streets surrounding that area so that there wouldn't be any narco movement or we wouldn't start a neighborhood war. And there was a real chance we could because they would believe that we were coming for them and not this fugitive. So we locked off the neighborhood at 4 a.m. We put swimmers on the backside. We had San Juan Police Department swimmers on the backside to go into the canal.
Wow.
Just in case he jumped and ran. We had 2 dog teams. We had a helicopter, and we quietly filtered into the neighborhood. And then I arrived with the rest team. They let us in on the street in front of his house. The U.S. Marshals made entry through the first gate with us. I was in the entry stack. I do remember the U.S. Marshal, Pedro, knocked on the door and said, he said, Stephen Williamson Varner, the assumed name, right? We don't want to let him know yet.
Yeah.
Stephen Williamson Varner, come to the door, we're going to saw it down. And the guy came out. It was uneventful, but we had to be ready for anything, right?
Yeah.
We had to be ready for anything.
I mean, that's a big presence in that neighborhood. You're right.
It was huge.
4 a.m. was probably the best time to do this.
It took us 20 minutes to get out of the neighborhood because think of all the cars that we had. By the time we had the exfil plan, which was the original police would leave and then we would essentially go in the center. And the helicopter was above us the whole time. We ran code back to the office and put him in the holding cell. He was under the assumption that he was under arrest for passport fraud somehow, or there's an issue with his passport. He didn't know quite what was going on. And we got out of that neighborhood. We took his fingerprints, and the next step was this. Once we got the fingerprint return, it was the fastest fingerprint return I have gotten from the FBI's fingerprint system. We got that return. Phones started ringing. People started calling because it sends a notification, hey, they have this fugitive possibly, because the print is an exact return. I went to the cage where we had him in the holding cell, and I put the print return on it, and I said, David Anthony Pike, we know who you are. And at that point in time, he just kind of shook himself out. He breathed a huge sigh of relief. His face went kind of pale. And within a minute or so of that, in a 66-degree holding cell, he fell asleep and was snoring. And I was told by the marshals afterwards it's because he's been on the lam for 34 years and he was exhausted from running.
Oh.
And so we at that point in time, we notified him, we have you. He disputed it, in the first day or two, but
Right.
when he went for his first appearance in court, the judge says, I need your real name. And he, partnered with his public defender and said, okay, the game's up. My name's David Anthony Pike. And that's how we truly knew who he was, because he admitted it. But we had his print return, right?
So Pike, how did he even know how to get a false identity?
So Pike assumed Stephen Williamson Varner's name, we believe, through his uncle, who is his lawyer, who bailed him out of jail after he was charged with capital murder. His uncle, we believe, had looked for someone that didn't have a social security number. And this child who had died I think it was about 5 years before Pike was born, he was able to help him get a social security card and say, oh no, this is Stephen Williamson Varner. Using that social security card, he established his identity as Stephen Williamson Varner and obtained a U.S. passport. When he was on the run, getting out of that area because the game would be up, people were looking for him the whole time. When he left from the Northwest and went to the Dominican Republic, he became a fisherman. And so he was on and off of boats, probably working, under the table the whole time. He was largely unemployed in Puerto Rico, but would hop on boats and go be a fisherman. So that's how he got his living and eked that out. And his family was working too, but just to kind of protect them and what they do, I'll just kind of leave that out. But yeah, it was very thin employment, but he hid under that name because his uncle helped him get it.
I mean, I can't imagine the shock to his family that he wasn't who he had said he was for all those years. I mean, you think you know someone when you marry them or they're your father, and all of a sudden, the rug is pulled out of you. This guy's wanted for murder. That shock, I can't imagine.
I'll add something to that. His family stood by him and did believe that he indeed was Stephen Williamson Varner. How can this be? I've just known you as this. Until in court, he said, no, that's it. I'm David Anthony Pike. And it was like a crestfall moment for them.
Yeah.
Because they were in court and they realized that they had been with someone who was living a lie all this time and that had done something bad, something very bad, committed murder. So, it's very unfortunate on the other side of the house. But it was a very interesting being on the lam for 34 years, getting the name, hiding as a fisherman. And that's how he did it.
I mean, this guy was smart about it. He wasn't
That's right.
uninformed about what to do. Probably got some kind of advice.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have to tell you, I think he would have continued if it wasn't for James.
Right.
And his, consular investigatory methods and what he decided to do.
He would have gotten away with it.
Right. That guy in my
died.
book he's great. He's great. And I hope he's doing very well. So.
Okay. Well, shout out to James.
Yeah, shout out to James. I do have to say, though, that finding David after 34 years, it wasn't for lack of trying. The U.S. Marshals High-Risk Fugitive Task Force had been looking for this guy for 34 years. They have traced across the U.S. So did Chambers County Sheriff. And when we made that phone call, this is the exciting part for me.
Okay.
We made that phone call just around 5:30 in the morning when we got him back to the office and said, we have your guy. We woke him up. The dispatch called T.J. Wood, who was the major over in Chambers County Sheriff. He was the investigator. He was a small kid when this murder happened. He remembered it for all his career.
Wow.
And had been working it as a cold case forever. And we told him, hey, we did an operation, which we titled Sweet Home Alabama, Operation Sweet Home Alabama, because we wanted to bring this home to you, and we got your guy. And within a few hours of that, they had a press conference with the remaining family that was still living of the victim from the murder that David Anthony Pike did. And there wasn't a dry eye in there, or our office. It was a momentous, occasion. It really was amazing to know that we had such an impact on solving this for him after 34 years.
That's quite the story.
Yeah.
It sounds like an exciting time.
It was great.
What was the meat and potatoes of the office? What was the majority of the cases that you worked in San Juan, in Puerto Rico?
Sure. Well, I will tell you that 30% of all DS cases have a nexus for passport fraud, have a nexus to Puerto Rico identity documents and fraud. That's a huge amount. And that's for all of
Yeah.
our field offices that we have. Even some overseas embassies still get, people applying that say, well, I just need to renew my passport. I'm Puerto Rican, and we identify fraud there too. So it's more than just, the continental United States field offices that we have. There's a high burden on that office in Puerto Rico. Their work is fast. They are precise. They have a wide partnership with the law enforcement agencies there. We are constantly busy running leads, which is other offices across the U.S. saying, hey, can you go interview this person in Puerto Rico and see if this is a true identity? Go interview their mom if you can and see if this person is their son. And so most of our time was spent doing that. We also have quite a few arrests down there as well, from regular passport or visa fraud cases, kind of organic to the island. This one, he had applied to renew his passport in Puerto Rico, and it was sent to New Hampshire for processing. And just on a regular poll, checking, findagrave.com and finding that child's name and then sending it to us, 16 furious days of investigating, and then getting a fugitive of 34 years. And David Anthony Pike was sentenced to a little less than 2 years in a federal penitentiary. And then afterwards, Chambers County got him. Yeah. And he pled right away. That is a death penalty state still. They still have the chair, believe it or not. I'm being serious about that. So he pled to 20 years and is serving it out right now. And he, I think that he's probably going to see his final years in custody in Alabama.
Wow, this is a big deal. This is a big deal for a lot of people.
It was a momentous moment, but it was a real success for Diplomatic Security Service, and it shows the outreach that we have. Walter, who is a supervisory special agent there in charge of the office, has done a fantastic job. His team is rock solid. They're bilingual. They blend in. They know all the different agencies, and they get work done. And that is a very unique skill. Man, kudos to them. I'm very proud of them.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, John.
It's a pleasure. It's such an honor to be here and tell an amazing story. I think it's an amazing story.
Thank you. So, this is an amazing story. Thank you for your time.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate it. Yeah.